The sky over Seoul burned red. Day stood on the rooftop of the medical center and watched the alien ships descend through the clouds. They were massive, each one the size of a city block. Their hulls glowed with purple light that hurt to look at directly. Below him, people screamed and ran through the streets. Day was a doctor. He had spent 10 years learning how to save lives. Now he wondered if any of that knowledge would matter. The aliens had arrived 3 days ago. They called themselves the Vortan Empire. They said Earth belonged to them now. His communicator buzzed. It was Nari, his colleague from the emergency department. Her voice shook when she spoke. Day, we have wounded coming in. Hundreds of them. The aliens attacked the Western District. He ran for the stairs. His heart pounded in his chest. The hospital was chaos when he arrived. Blood covered the floors. Nurses rushed between beds. People cried out in pain. Day had seen bad days before, but nothing like this. The wounds were strange. Burn marks that went deep into the flesh. Some kind of energy weapon. Day worked for hours, trying to save as many as he could. Many died. Their bodies simply could not handle the alien weapons. Nari worked beside him. Her hands moved quickly, her face focused. She was the best nurse he knew. Even now, covered in blood and exhausted, she did not stop. Why are they doing this? She asked between patients. We never did anything to them. Day had no answer. The Vortons had not explained. They had simply arrived and started taking over. Their message was clear. Surrender or die. By evening, the attacks had stopped. Day stepped outside for air. The city was dark. Power was out in most areas. Fires burned in the distance. He saw other doctors and nurses sitting on the ground, too tired to stand. A man approached him. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a military uniform. His name tag read, Tay. He was a colonel in the Earth Defense Force. Doctor, Tay said, we need your help. I am helping, Day replied. People are dying in there. More will die if we do not fight back, Tay said. The Vortons think we are weak. They think one attack will make us surrender. But they are wrong. Day looked at the colonel. The man's eyes were hard, but not cruel. He had seen combat before. Day could tell. What do you want from me? Day asked. We captured one of their soldiers, Tay explained. It is injured. We need to understand their biology. If we know how they work, we can find their weaknesses. Day felt his stomach turn. He was a doctor. He saved lives. He did not hurt people, even aliens. But then he thought about the patients inside. The burns that went to the bone. The children who would never see their parents again. The old people who died, crying for help. Where is it? Day asked. Tay smiled grimly. Follow me. They drove through empty streets. The city felt like a ghost town. They arrived at a military base on the outskirts. Soldiers with rifles guarded every entrance. Tay led Day deep underground, through concrete tunnels lit by emergency lights. The alien was in a cell. It was huge, nearly 3 meters tall. Its skin was gray and covered in hard plates like armor. 4 arms hung from its torso. Its head was flat, with no visible eyes. But Day could feel it watching him. It has not spoken, Tay said. But it is alive. Barely. Day approached slowly. The alien had a wound in its side. Purple blood leaked from it. The creature made a sound like grinding metal. Was it in pain? Could aliens feel pain? Day set up his equipment. He took samples of the blood and tissue. The alien did not resist. Maybe it was too weak, or maybe it did not care. As Day worked, Nari arrived. She had volunteered to help. Together, they examined the alien for hours. Its biology was strange. Its organs were not like human organs. But there were similarities, too. It had a heart. It had lungs. It bled when cut. They can die, Nari whispered. Just like us, Day nodded. That was important. If they could die, They could be stopped. He found something else too. The alien's armor plating was not natural. It was attached surgically. Underneath, the skin was soft and vulnerable. The Vortons had made themselves into weapons, but they were still flesh and blood. Day compiled his findings and gave them to Tay. The colonel read through the report, carefully. "This is good," Tay said. "This is very good. We can use this." "What will you do?" Day asked. "Fight back," Tay replied. "The Vortons think we will surrender. But humans do not surrender. We never have. We never will." Day returned to the hospital that night. More wounded had arrived. He worked through the darkness, saving who he could. But something had changed inside him. He had seen the enemy up close. He had learned their secrets. The Vortons were strong, but they were not invincible. Humans would find a way. They always did. Outside, the red sky slowly faded to black. In the distance, he heard explosions. The war had begun, and Earth would not go quietly into the night. The broadcast started on the 4th day. Every screen in every city showed the same thing. A Vortan commander stood before a camera. Its massive form filled the frame. When it spoke, the words came through a translation device in broken human language. "Humans of Earth," it said, "you have two choices: surrender and serve, or resist and die. We have conquered 400 worlds. You are nothing special. You are weak. You are alone. You have 1 day to decide." The screen went black. Day watched from the hospital break room. Around him, other staff members sat in silence. No one spoke. What could they say? But then Yuna, a young surgical resident, stood up. Her hands were clenched into fists. Her voice was loud and clear. "No," she said. "I will not surrender. I will not serve. If they want this world, they will have to take it from us." Others began to nod. Day felt something stirring in his chest. It was not hope exactly. It was something fiercer, something more dangerous. It was defiance. Across the city, Colonel Tay gathered his commanders. They met in an underground bunker deep beneath the military headquarters. Maps covered the walls. Satellite images showed Vortan positions across the planet. There were hundreds of ships, thousands of soldiers. "We are outnumbered," one commander said. His name was Hyun. He was young but smart. "Our weapons barely scratch their armor. Their shields stop our missiles. How do we fight this?" Tay looked at the medical report Day had given him. He had read it a dozen times. The answer was there. He just needed to see it. "We cannot fight them head on," Tay said. "We are not strong enough. Not yet. But we can be smart. We can be fast. We can hit them where they are weak." "Where are they weak?" Hyun asked. Tay pointed to the report. "Underneath their armor. Their real skin is soft. We just need to get through the plating first." "How?" another commander asked. Her name was Rin. She commanded the Eastern forces. "Their armor is too strong for normal weapons. Then we make new weapons," Tay said. "We use what we learned. We adapt. That is what humans do best." He laid out his plan. It was risky. Many would die. But doing nothing meant everyone would die. At least this way, they had a chance. The scientists worked through the night. Engineers and weapons experts studied the Vortan biology. They discovered something useful. The armor plating was attached at joints. Those joints were vulnerable. A blade at the right angle could slip through. They also found that Vortan blood was highly acidic. If they could make the aliens bleed, that blood could damage their own armor from the inside. It was a weakness the Vortans themselves had created. Meanwhile, Day continued working at the hospital. More wounded came every day. Some were soldiers. Some were civilians caught in the fighting. He saved who he could. But he also started training others. Nari helped him organize classes. They taught people basic medical skills: how to stop bleeding, how to treat burns, how to save a life when there were no doctors around. Hundreds of people attended. They learned quickly. They had to. One night, a soldier was brought in. His legs were badly burned. Day worked on him for hours. The soldier stayed conscious the whole time. He did not cry out. He did not complain. "What is your name?" Day asked. "Bin," the soldier replied. "I am a scout. I was mapping Vortan positions when they found me." "You are lucky to be alive," Nari said. Bin smiled weakly. "Luck had nothing to do with it. My team covered me. They fought so I could escape. 3 of them died." "I am sorry," Day said. "Do not be sorry," Bin replied. "Just make sure I can walk again. I need to get back out there. I need to finish what they started." Day worked harder. He would make sure Bin could walk. He would make sure all of them could keep fighting. The deadline came. 24 hours after the broadcast, the Vortan commander appeared again on every screen. It expected humanity to surrender. It expected broken people begging for mercy. Instead, it got silence. No government responded. No leader came forward to negotiate. The cities were quiet. But it was not the quiet of defeat. It was the quiet before a storm. The Vortan commander made a sound that might have been anger. "You have chosen death," it said. "So be it." The attacks began immediately. Vortan soldiers landed in major cities around the world. They moved through streets, destroying everything. Their weapons turned buildings to ash. Their armor made them seem unstoppable. But humans were ready this time. They had prepared. They had planned. In Seoul, Colonel Tae led his forces through underground tunnels. They came up behind Vortan positions. They used the new weapons the scientists had made. Blades designed to pierce armor joints. Explosives that scattered Vortan blood. The first Vortan soldiers fell. Then more. The aliens had expected easy targets. They found soldiers who fought like demons instead. In the hospital, Day heard the fighting above. Explosions shook the walls. Dust fell from the ceiling. But he kept working. People needed him. He would not abandon them. Yuna worked beside him. Her hands were steady. Her voice was calm. She had found her courage. So had many others. A message came through Tae's communicator. It was from other cities. Paris was fighting. New York was fighting. Tokyo, London, Moscow. Every city on Earth was fighting. The Vortans had expected slaves. They found warriors instead. The first day of real war ended. The Vortans controlled less ground than they had started with. They had lost hundreds of soldiers. Their ships pulled back to regroup. In the bunker, Tae allowed himself a small smile. They had hurt the enemy. They had proven humans could fight back. But the war was far from over. It had only just begun. Above ground, Day stepped outside the hospital. The sky was still dark. Fires still burned. But something had changed. People were not running anymore. They were standing. They were ready. Humanity had answered the Vortan ultimatum. And the answer was war. 3 weeks into the war, something changed. The Vortans had expected a quick victory. They had conquered 400 worlds before Earth. Each time, it took less than a month. The pattern was always the same. Attack, intimidate, accept, surrender, move on. But Earth did not surrender. Earth fought back. And the longer the war lasted, the better humans became at it. Colonel Tae stood in the command center and studied the latest reports. His forces had destroyed 12 Vortan landing ships. They had reclaimed 3 cities. The enemy was losing ground every day, but the cost was high. Thousands of soldiers had died. Civilians were caught in the fighting. Resources were running low. They needed an advantage. Something big. Kai, the head scientist, entered the room. He looked tired, but excited. He carried a datapad filled with information. "We found something," Kai said. "Something important." He showed Tay the data. They had been studying captured Vorton equipment. Their weapons, their armor, their ships. Everything ran on the same energy source. A crystalline core that generated massive power. "If we can disable these cores," Kai explained, "their technology stops working. No weapons. No shields. No communications." "How do we disable them?" Tay asked. "That is the problem," Kai admitted. "The cores are heavily protected. We would need to get inside their ships, past their defenses. It would be suicide." Tay thought for a moment. Suicide missions were nothing new. They had been running them for weeks. But this one might actually change the war. "Find me volunteers," Tay said. "People who understand the technology. People who are willing to take the risk." Kai nodded and left. Tay knew they would find volunteers. There was no shortage of brave people on Earth. At the hospital, Day worked on another wave of casualties. The fighting was constant now. No breaks, no rest. Just an endless stream of wounded and dying. His hands moved automatically. He barely thought anymore. Just acted. Nari brought him water. He drank it without stopping his work. She looked worried. "You need to sleep," she said. "You have been awake for 30 hours. So have you," Day replied. "I am younger," Nari said with a weak smile. Day finished stitching a wound and moved to the next patient. Yuna was working on the other side of the room. She had become an excellent surgeon in just 3 weeks. War had taught her more than years of school ever could. A commotion erupted at the entrance. Soldiers carried in someone on a stretcher. It was Bin, the scout. He had been sent back into the field despite his injuries. Now, he was back. Burns covered his arms. Blood soaked his uniform. Day rushed over. "What happened?" "Vortan patrol," Bin gasped. "We were gathering intelligence. They found us. Most of my team made it out. But I got the data. It is important." He pressed a small drive into Day's hand. "Get this to Colonel Tay. It shows their main command ship. Where it is, how it is defended. Everything." Day nodded and handed the drive to a soldier. Then he got to work on Bin. The man had saved countless lives with his reconnaissance. Now it was time to save his. Hours later, Tay had the data. The Vortan command ship was in orbit above the Pacific Ocean. It was massive, 10 times bigger than their other ships. It controlled all Vortan forces on Earth. If they could take it down, the entire invasion would collapse. But the defenses were incredible. Hundreds of fighters patrolled around it. Energy shields covered every surface. Getting close would be impossible. Getting inside would be a miracle. Hyun studied the schematics. "There," he said, pointing to a small port on the underside. "That is a maintenance access. Too small for their soldiers. But a human could fit. How do we get someone there?" Rin asked. "Their fighters would destroy any ship we send." "Not if they think it is debris," Hyun said. "We disguise a small pod as wreckage. Let it drift toward the ship. Once it is close enough, the pilot activates thrusters and gets inside." "That is insane," Rin said. "Yes," Tay agreed. "But it might work. We need a pilot. Someone skilled. Someone brave." A voice spoke from the doorway. "I will do it." They turned. It was Sol, one of their best pilots. She had flown more combat missions than anyone. She had shot down 30 Vortan fighters. Everyone knew her name. "Sol." "This is different," Tay said. "This is not a combat mission. This is infiltration. If you are caught, there will be no rescue." "I understand," Sol replied. "But if we can end this war, I will take the risk." They spent 2 days preparing. Kai showed Sol how to disable the energy cores. She memorized every step. There would be no room for mistakes. Day heard about the mission and went to see Sol before she left. He found her in the hangar, checking her equipment. "You should take this," Day said, handing her a medical kit. "Just in case," Day said. Sol smiled. "If I need medical attention, I will already be dead. But thank you." "Why are you doing this?" Day asked. "You could stay here. Keep fighting from the ground. You have done more than enough." Sol looked at the pod that would carry her to the command ship. "My family died in the first attack," she said quietly. "My parents, my brother, everyone. I have nothing left except this war. If I can end it, if I can make sure no one else loses what I lost, then it is worth it." Day had no response to that. He simply nodded. The launch happened at dawn. Sol climbed into the pod. It was cramped and cold. The pod was fired into space like a projectile. It tumbled, end over end, looking like debris from a destroyed ship. Vortan fighters passed nearby. They scanned it briefly, but dismissed it as junk. The pod drifted closer to the command ship. Sol waited. Her heart pounded. Her hands were steady. When she was close enough, she fired the thrusters. Sol opened the hatch and climbed inside. She was in the Vortan command ship, alone, surrounded by enemies. The war was about to change. Sol moved through the corridors of the Vortan command ship. Everything was huge. Doors were 3 meters tall. Hallways were wide enough for vehicles. The walls pulsed with purple light. She felt like an insect crawling through a giant machine. Her scanner showed the location of the main reactor. It was deep in the ship, past dozens of checkpoints and guard stations. She had maybe an hour before someone discovered her pod attached to the hull. Maybe less. She moved quickly but carefully. Vortan soldiers passed by in groups. Sol pressed herself into alcoves and behind equipment. The aliens never looked down. They did not expect an enemy to be so small. After 20 minutes, she reached a vertical shaft. It led down toward the reactor level. Sol attached a cable and began descending. The shaft was dark, except for the glow of the crystal cores powering various systems. Halfway down, she heard something. Footsteps. A patrol was coming. Sol pressed against the wall and held her breath. 2 Vortan soldiers walked past the shaft opening. They were talking in their grinding language. She could not understand the words, but the tone was clear. They were confident. They thought they had already won. Sol continued down. She reached the reactor level and found herself in a massive chamber. The main reactor was the size of a building. It glowed bright purple. Energy arced between crystalline spires. The heat was intense. Around the reactor, dozens of Vortan technicians worked at control stations. There were too many. Sol could not get to the reactor without being seen. She needed a distraction. Sol pulled out a small explosive charge. It was meant for the reactor, but she had others. She set the timer for 30 seconds and threw it down a side corridor. Then, she hid. The explosion ripped through the corridor. Alarms blared. The technicians abandoned their stations and rushed toward the sound. Vortan soldiers came running from other parts of the ship. Sol ran for the reactor. She climbed onto the main platform. Up close, the energy was overwhelming. Her skin felt like it was burning. She pulled out the remaining charges and began placing them on the crystal cores, just as Kai had taught her. A shout came from behind. A Vortan soldier had seen her. It raised its weapon. Sol dove behind a control panel as energy blasts tore through the air. She rolled, came up, firing her own weapon. The bullets did nothing to the armor. More soldiers were coming. Sol placed the last charge and activated the timer. 60 seconds. She ran. Vortan soldiers chased her. Energy weapons lit up the corridor. Sol zigzagged, barely staying ahead. She reached the vertical shaft and jumped, grabbing the cable. She climbed as fast as she could. Behind her, the timer hit 0. The explosion was massive. The reactor cores shattered. Energy cascaded through the ship. Systems failed. Lights went out. Gravity fluctuated. Sol held onto the cable as the ship shook. She reached the top of the shaft and ran for her pod. Vortan soldiers were everywhere now, but they were confused. Their communications were down. Their weapons were losing power. Some of their armor systems had failed. Sol reached the maintenance port. Her pod was still there. She climbed in and sealed the hatch. The pod detached and fired its thrusters. She shot away from the command ship just as secondary explosions began tearing it apart. On Earth, Colonel Tay watched from the command center. Satellites showed the Vortan command ship breaking up. Pieces fell toward the atmosphere. The ship that had coordinated the entire invasion was gone. It worked, Hyun said in disbelief. She actually did it, but there was no time to celebrate. Tay activated the emergency channel. All forces, this is command. The enemy has lost their leadership. Attack now. Hit them with everything we have. Across the planet, human forces launched their assault. They had been preparing for this moment. Stockpiling weapons. Planning strategies. Now, they unleashed it all at once. In Seoul, ground forces pushed forward. They hit Vortan positions that were suddenly disorganized and confused. Without the command ship, the alien soldiers did not know what to do. Some tried to fight. Others tried to retreat. All of them died. Day heard the fighting from the hospital. It was louder than ever. More intense. He knew this was the final battle. Either humanity would win today, or they would lose everything. More wounded arrived. But this time, they were smiling despite their injuries. The soldiers knew they were winning. They could feel it. Bin was back on his feet, helping move patients. His legs were still weak, but he refused to stay in bed. "I am not dying in a hospital," he had said. "If I die, it will be fighting." But he would not die today. None of them would. Not if they could help it. The battle raged for hours. Vortan ships tried to flee. Human fighters shot them down. Vortan soldiers tried to regroup. Human forces surrounded and destroyed them. Without coordination, without leadership, the mighty Vortan Empire fell apart. By evening, it was over. The last Vortan positions had been overrun. The last ships had been destroyed or driven away. Earth was free. In space, Sol's pod was picked up by a rescue shuttle. She was unconscious from the G-forces and heat exposure. But she was alive. They brought her to Tae's command center. He was there when she woke up. So was Kai. So was Hyun and Rin. They all stood at attention. "You did it," Tae said simply. "You saved us all." Sol tried to sit up but was too weak. "Did we win?" she asked. "Yes," Tae replied. "The Vortans are gone. Earth is ours again." Sol closed her eyes. Tears ran down her cheeks. Across the planet, people emerged from shelters and hospitals and bunkers. They looked at the sky. It was no longer red. No more alien ships. No more attacks. Just clouds and stars and freedom. In the hospital, Day stood with Nari and Yuna. They watched through the windows as people celebrated in the streets. After weeks of darkness, there was finally light. "We survived," Nari said. "We did more than survive," Day replied. "We won. The war was over." Humanity had faced the Vortan Empire and emerged victorious. They had been outnumbered, outgunned, and given no chance of success. But they had won anyway. Because that was what humans did. They fought. They adapted. They never gave up. The Vortans had conquered 400 worlds. Earth was not going to be 401. 6 months after the war ended, Day stood on the same rooftop where he had watched the alien ships arrive. The city below was different now. Buildings were being rebuilt. Streets were full of people again. Life was returning to normal, or at least a new kind of normal. The scars remained. Empty lots where buildings had stood. Memorials for the fallen. The population was smaller. Nearly 1 million people had died in Sol alone. Millions more across the world. But the survivors were rebuilding. That was what humans did. Nari joined him on the rooftop. She brought 2 cups of coffee. They stood in silence for a while, just watching the city wake up. "How many patients today?" Day asked. "Only 15, Nari replied. "Mostly routine cases. No combat injuries." "It feels strange," Day understood. They had spent weeks treating nothing but war wounds. Burns, broken bones, trauma. Now they were back to treating regular illnesses. It should have felt good. Instead, it felt empty, like something was missing. "Do you think they will come back?" Nari asked. "The Vortons?" "I do not know," Day admitted. That was true. Earth had changed. Before the invasion, nations barely cooperated. Now they worked together. The Earth Defense Force had been expanded. New weapons were being developed. Humanity had learned its lesson. Never again would they be caught unprepared. Colonel Tay had been promoted to general. He now commanded all defensive operations. His first order was to build ships. Real warships. If the Vortons could travel between stars, then humans would learn to do the same. They would take the fight to the enemy next time. Kai and his team of scientists were reverse engineering Vortan technology. They had recovered dozens of crashed ships. Each one was a treasure of advanced science. Faster than light travel. Energy shields. Weapon systems beyond anything humans had imagined. It would take years to understand it all. But they had time now. Sol had recovered from her injuries. She was a hero now. Everyone knew her name. Children wanted to be pilots like her. The government offered her medals and honors. She declined most of them. She said she was just a soldier doing her job, but she accepted one honor. A statue in the center of Sol. It showed her climbing from her pod onto the Vortan ship. The inscription read, "One person can change everything." Day had attended the unveiling. So had thousands of others. Bin had also recovered. His legs would never be the same. He walked with a slight limp now, but he refused to retire. Instead, he trained new scouts. He taught them how to move, unseen, how to gather intelligence, how to survive behind enemy lines. His students were excellent. Bin was a harsh teacher, but a good one. Yuna had become chief of surgery. At only 28 years old, she was the youngest person to ever hold the position. But no one questioned it. She had proven herself during the war. She had saved hundreds of lives. She deserved the role. The hospital itself had been rebuilt. It was bigger now, better equipped. They had learned so much during the war about trauma care and emergency medicine. That knowledge would save lives for generations to come. Day had been offered positions at universities. They wanted him to teach, to share what he had learned. But he declined. His place was here, treating patients, training new doctors, making sure Earth was ready for whatever came next. In orbit above Earth, construction continued on the first human warship. It was massive, built using both human and Vortan technology. When it was finished, it would be the most powerful vessel humanity had ever created. They were building 5 more, just like it. The United Nations had reformed into the Earth Council. Every nation had a voice. Every nation contributed to the defense. The old divisions had not disappeared entirely, but they mattered less now. Humanity had faced extinction. They had looked into the void, and they had blinked. Messages were sent into space. Not pleas for peace, not offers of surrender, but warnings. Earth had defeated the Vortan Empire. Any species that came to Earth with hostile intent would face the same fate. Humanity would not be conquered. Humanity would not be enslaved. Some people worried about making enemies, about antagonizing other alien civilizations. But most agreed with the message. The universe needed to know that Earth was not defenseless. that humans would fight for their home. Day received a letter one day. It was from the family of a patient he had treated during the war, a young soldier who had lost both arms. Day had saved his life. The family wanted to thank him. They invited him to dinner. He went. The soldier was there. He had prosthetic arms now, advanced ones made with Vortan technology. He could move them almost naturally. He was learning to play piano again. "I thought my life was over," the soldier said. "But you gave me a second chance. Thank you." Day did not know what to say. He had just done his job. But he realized that was the point. Everyone had just done their job. Soldiers fought. Doctors healed. Scientists invented. Pilots flew. And together, they had achieved the impossible. That night, Day returned to the rooftop. The stars were bright above. Somewhere out there, the Vortan Empire still existed. Somewhere out there, other threats lurked. But Earth was ready now. A shooting star crossed the sky. Day made a wish. Not for peace. Peace was a luxury humans could no longer afford. Instead, he wished for strength, for unity, for the courage to face whatever came next. The last stand was over. Humanity had proven itself. They had shown the universe what they were capable of. They had shown that humans would not go quietly, would not give up, would never surrender. The Vortans had come to Earth expecting slaves. They found warriors instead. Now Earth looked to the stars not with fear but with defiance. The message was clear. Humanity was here. Humanity was strong. And humanity would survive. The war had ended. But Earth's story was just beginning. Day left the rooftop and went back to work. There were patients to see, lives to save, a future to build. And somewhere in the dark between stars, the universe watched and learned a new truth. Never underestimate humanity. Never assume they will break. Because humans have something no other species can match. They have hope, they have courage, and they have an unbreakable will to survive. The last stand had ended. But humanity stood taller than ever before.